this one. Unusual boxing wrestling match. Jerry Lawler facing two opponents, both permitted to be in the ring at the same time. Jimmy Hart, who will be wrestling, and television and movie star Andy Kaufman as Hart's partner.
Lawler, I am going to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. I have been trained by the great Muhammad Ali. You don't know what you're up against. You're so cocky now. You think you're big stuff, big stuff. You haven't seen anything until you met the iron fists of Andy Kaufman. You think I'm just a little man. Wait till you see I have been training, man. I have been training. You will learn to respect a Hollywood star. I'm going to knock you out to the count of 10, and you're going to meet the ultimate humiliation. And there's no pile driver. That's against the rules.
So you were saying you watched Andy Kaufman's "I'm from Hollywood" again?
I did, yeah. I rewatched that. I was watching the WWE Treasure Hunters episode, and one of the episodes was they had Jerry Lawler on there, and it basically the treasure they were trying to find was the neck brace.
Yeah.
For Andy Kaufman for his gimmick that he did with Jerry Lawler.
And did Lawler had it?
No, there was a collector that had it, and it was Bill Apter, who was a Long Island guy. Shout out, but he was in charge of all the big three before the internet. You had the wrestling mags, and you had Inside Wrestling, The Wrestler, and the granddaddy of them all, Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And that was his magazine. But he was friends with Andy Kaufman, and he's the one that was trying to help Andy, who was also a Long Island guy, get some kind of contact into the wrestling business to run this angle. So yeah, it just got me seeing that neck brace and just remembering how phenomenal that angle was, because this was even before rock and wrestling. This was before celebrities really embraced it, and he was like the celebrity. Not only embraced it, but like he and with it, and it was like an instant expert on Kayfabe, right? Because that was basically his comedy gimmick was Kayfabe.
Right.
So it was just like, and he just brought that into wrestling. So it just got me wanting to go back and revisit that awesome documentary that's on YouTube. And I think it's hard to buy the DVD for the I'm From Hollywood.
I remember having the DVD.
You had the DVD?
I think I had it. I don't know, but there was a time when we all decided collectively that DVDs didn't matter. A lot of it's like one of those things when media changes formats and you're like, I don't need all these cassettes.
Yeah.
And then 20 years later, cassettes, old cassettes are going for $100 on eBay.
Oh my gosh, that's terrifying to think, because I know I've dropped off some at half-price books and sold a bunch of singles
Yeah.
at the time. But yeah, because I was looking, I was just like, there's got to be a way to buy this I'm From Hollywood, so I don't have to keep watching the YouTube version. Although shout out to the person who put it on there, because we're giving you numbers.
Shout out to YouTube.
Yeah, that for even existing to make that. But you were also a huge fan of this documentary too, right?
Yeah. I don't know how I got interested in Andy Kaufman. I don't remember. It was before, the biography with Jim Carrey came out, which I told you I'm not a fan of.
Yeah, you were saying you're not a Man in the Moon guy.
Not a Man in the Moon guy. I felt like it was pretty surface level, and it was like Andy Kaufman's greatest hits, and I wasn't a fan of Jim Carrey as Andy Kaufman in that movie.
Yeah, that was. I feel like that was your hot take, right?
Yeah, I mean,
there was people just like talking about. He did a seance, and he felt like he was possessed by the spirit of Andy Kaufman, and they were talking about, him getting an Academy Award.
Yeah,
and you and the Academy just weren't feeling it because he wasn't even nominated, right?
No, I mean the film was pretty mediocre, I think overall. I don't think Andy would have approved of Jim Carrey as him.
It's very possible that he wouldn't, right?
I really don't think he would have approved of Jim Carrey as him. Jim Carrey was always a straight up comedian, and Andy always said he wasn't a comedian at all. And I think it would have been better off. I heard there was rumors that Nick Cage was up for it, Hank Azaria was up for it, a few other guys. I think pretty much anybody else would have been better. I think Jim Carrey sort of drowned out the entire Andy Kaufman character, and you were watching Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey as Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
He definitely, if you hear the stories from Jerry Lawler, and who knows, maybe Jerry Lawler just knows kayfabe and work it. But he was basically, there was a lot of stories coming from that set of basically Jim Carrey like treating Jerry Lawler like shit, you know, and like spitting on him. And I know he did the, where he was really trying to hit him. And then
well, it was in that documentary that's on Netflix. There's a weird documentary where Jim Carrey. It's all about he's the spirit of Andy Kaufman, and you see him on set acting up.
Oh yes, and that wasn't him, and so I could never tell, just because I was, Jerry Lawler's old school kayfabe. It's just like, is he working the audience? Was this work? Because remember, they ended up doing a press conference, and he was like a real fight, but he said that Jim Carrey like spit on him, and he kept having to remind him, was like, me and Andy were in on this together, right?
Yeah,
like there's just like, it was like, I think it was a case of working the workers, right? It's just like you don't make gimmick money off the boys.
I don't think Jim Carrey understands wrestling.
No,
I think that was the problem.
Yeah, and it was, I don't know. Again, it's just like I enjoyed the movie in the sense that I was just really happy to get something with Andy Kaufman out there, just because, like you said, he didn't consider himself a comedian. He was a performance artist.
Yeah.
Just like, and they had such great, he was kayfaying his parents at the time. This guy was walking around kayfaying, people on the streets that he was never going to see again, right? It's just like, I'll go get a part-time job just so people would say, hey, you Andy Kaufman? He's like, no, I get that all the time.
Yeah.
And then he would quit the job the next.
He used to hang out in front of the comedy clubs and beg for money, and just do that to people, a few hours before the show, he'd be out there with a, with a bucket or just asking for handouts,
So yeah, he understood kayfabe probably better than a lot of the wrestlers and understood kayfabe. So it was a marriage made in heaven. So
just like we were listening to that podcast with Jerry Lawler a little while ago, where he was saying after he pile drived Andy Kaufman, that he demanded an ambulance and said, "No, I'll pay for it myself." So he got an ambulance, and then he stayed in the hospital for 3 days.
In traction.
Yeah.
You think the people in the hospital are just be like, "There's nothing wrong with you,"
Yeah.
but it's just like,
but he sold it.
Yeah, he was selling it, so and he never broke kayfabe. He was so good at it to this day. The rumors of like Tupac and Elvis being alive, that was just like, that's a stretch. But like for Andy Kaufman, there's still like a piece of me that's like, he could be alive. And he could be like, this was so funny that it's just like, most of the people who thought I was dead are dead now and I'm still alive. And just come out to your kids as like, hey, FYI, I came out to your kids that I never really died.
Yeah.
That's taking kayfabe to the grave. So, but it's just like, yeah, it was a great angle, and poor Vince McMahon Sr., who just didn't have, like, if it was Vince McMahon Jr. that Bill Apter approached at the time, Vince Jr. may have said, yes, let's get Andy Kaufman on there, but Vince Sr. is like, no, we're not going to do that. And Jerry Lawler, got to run with it, and, he was already over as the King of Memphis, but that really brought national notoriety to his territory when territories didn't get national notoriety.
Yeah.
Jerry Lawler was on the David Letterman show because of this, which is unheard of for like a territorial wrestler, right? It's not like he was, now it's, kind of normal. But like back then, to get Jerry Lawler on there and in his members only jacket and his, his goatee that he's famous for. And then they were working David Letterman, who's the, known for not really having that big of a, like, let's not veer off the script. I don't know. Is it, or did I just make that up? That it's just like, I feel like they went into business for himself on the David Letterman show.
Yeah, well, Letterman likes to control the interviews, right? That's how you end up with a talk show. You know how to work the guests and keep them delivering the setups for you to punchline them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know how to ask the right questions. But he seemed really uncomfortable in that segment.
He did, because and like you said, even because when he controls the interview and he has these setups, sometimes it's not going to make the guest look better. It's going to make Dave look better. So like for him, for them to go off script like that, and it sounded like Lawler was just talking about, that was Andy. Basically what in wrestling you'd call, let's call it in the ring. Yeah. They didn't plan this out beforehand, and he was just like, somehow he told him to slap him with his eyes. They called it in the ring. And that's probably why Letterman was like, what the hell just happened?
And that was, people at that point didn't really understand wrestling.
No.
There was no, kayfabe was still a thing. So when he I'm from Hollywood, it starts out with that montage of other comedians from the 80s, and they're like, yeah, Andy Kaufman was losing it, and he was, he was actually he was mentally ill or something because he wanted to wrestle when, it was all just work,
Yeah, and he was working. He was working everybody.
They didn't understand that the whole premise of this thing that he's doing is to make you angry.
Yeah, and it worked. I mean, it's just like he had literally people trying to do an intervention with him of just like trying to stop him. It was like, you can't, and even then, right, like you said, wrestling was kind of seen still in that sideshow sense.
Yeah.
Right? That it was just like, no, you can't go do that.
Yeah, people didn't get it so much that they voted him off Saturday Night Live.
Yeah. Did you see? I don't remember watching, that was one of the Man in the Moon movies parts that I was just kind of felt a little off, because I feel like, I was a little kid at the time, and you still can see the footage, but that felt off to me, that part. Didn't it seem like it was just kind of, it just felt like it was shoehorned in, and I felt like it was a bigger deal than it actually was.
Yeah, I think they just shoehorned it in to show that his popularity was waning because of the whole wrestling stuff that he was doing.
Yeah.
But it was a big deal because I think he thought that they were going to vote to keep him on,
Yeah.
And it wasn't really getting over the way that he intended it to,
No, and
it's like you said, you piss people off until they like you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't working that way because people didn't get that this was wrestling.
Yeah, and I think he pissed people off, but he didn't do enough, stuff at that time. Maybe he was going too far with it, and it's just and instead of okay, I'm going too far, let me start bringing him back, he would double down.
Yeah,
maybe just to annoy him. But I was just he didn't always do that. I remember. He was known for, he had that big show. Was that at Carnegie Hall where afterwards he sent everyone for milk and cookies?
Right.
Afterwards, it's just okay, this guy's cool. He got his milk and cookies.
Yeah.
People like free stuff. Mm-hmm. But maybe he just went too far there.
But he did that whole show at Carnegie Hall where he brought out his grandma or something, and she dies on stage. Oh, yeah. And then they do a big seance and bring her back. I think they had that in the movie too. But
they did have that in there, yeah.
But they don't show in the movie how long that angle went for. It wasn't just one match and he got a pile driver and he was out. It went on for a long time. Jerry Lawler threw fire in his face.
Oh yeah,
he
did. I forgot about the fireball.
They didn't show anything about what was the girl, Foxy.
Oh yeah,
the one that Lawler trained to take him on.
Yeah,
they glossed past all that. So this went on for a while. So he was in Memphis,
and that was back when shows were monthly. The house shows were monthly, so it had to be close. I mean, he was there every month it had to be close to a year.
Yeah,
right.
It seemed like a long time.
Man, it was just but that was nuclear heat. I mean, and think of we were talking about we've talked about this on the show before. It's just a lot of the guys these days work really hard and are not getting over. They'll do triple flip off a ladder through a table, at a house show, and people just kind of stand up and go, "Oh, did you see that?"
Yeah.
Whereas just all he was doing was standing in the middle of the ring, and you saw everybody on their feet, just vent, just raging for, Lawler, just hit this guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, granted, Kayfabe was still alive and well back then, and interviewing all the people, just I don't like him that much.
But he was a master of live performance, so he got it.
Oh,
he was in there with the boxing gloves and every time.
Just thinking of it, dude, it cracks me.
I know he was with the boxing gloves. He was always pointing at his head. It's I got the brains. he was doing it right. He knew how to make everyone hate him, and he never did a single wrestling move.
No, and it's just he didn't. He never really his kicks didn't look.
And he was wrestling in long johns,
Yes.
It's just it's another layer of dislike when it's just you're not even wearing the proper gear, and you're in this in just your underwear.
Yeah. And he really and he did the old school, just when a new wrestler would come to a territory, they would send vignettes ahead of time to start preparing them and he actually started doing the vignettes and recording them, and that's when he was going heavy and just like, I'm going to introduce, the people in Memphis to this. This is a bar of soap. And what you do is just like getting on them and then just making fun of their accents. It's just like, "Man, you going to wrestle me, Mr. Lawler?"
That was also interesting that they're in that podcast, they recorded those at Lawler's house.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they did them at his house.
But it was just so, it was masterful, that whole angle. And just like Lawler in that whole Memphis territory, got so much mileage out of one guy like that. I mean, that was like, if you were a full-time pro wrestler, that's your gold at that point, right? You can pretty much do whatever you want. And he was just having too much fun. And it was cutting edge. That was what, in this early 70s, when they really got into like the women's lib, and they had the battle of the sexes, right, versus Billie Jean King versus Bobby Riggs. And he had that, obnoxious, but then, Kaufman took it another step further and declared himself the intergender champion of the world.
Yeah.
And just would only wrestle women.
Yeah.
And that's when these first started. Because I guess he must have been a huge fan of wrestling, and just like because it's performance art, right? So I think he gravitated towards that. But that was risky stuff back then, because did it seem like to you that, the women were like, it was like a shoot?
Oh, yeah.
It didn't seem like they were just like, it didn't feel staged. Like he must have just said, do your best to try to take me down, I guess. Because it looked like, we talked about this before, like a real fight always just looks ugly and awkward. There's nothing to it. And it's just like some of those like takedowns, especially when he was with Foxy, I was just like, it looked like he was about to lose.
And I think he was a tall guy. He wasn't, he was skinny, but he was pretty tall. He was over 6 feet. So he did have some size on these women, or the initial women, the challengers.
But just having that intergender, because before he was doing it in the ring, right? He was doing it on stages.
Yeah. Yeah. He would literally do it in a comedy club.
Just like on a hard stage. It's like having anybody, because that's right there, dude. That's like old school carny wrestling, right? Before you would sell tickets, because you'd have this one. He wasn't even a shooter, right? That was a hooker. That was like when you had a hooker, not a hooker like the hookers that Andy liked. The hookers were like the wrestlers that were like, if you ever needed to get your belt back, or if you had somebody that was going to try to go into business for yourself, a hooker would be a guy that probably a Brock Lesnar type there is just like, you knew nobody can beat him, and you'd have him in the ring, and you would do that in carnival tents, right? And you just basically put somebody in there, just like, I'll give any amount of money, and then you pull somebody from the audience, and you pull real people in there.
Yeah.
And this hooker needed to be able to take him down before you'd set up to like the person that you actually planted in the crowd to set up for that match. He was doing that on stage on comedy clubs. I was just like, eventually you'd get to his comedy plant, but he would pull real people on stage to fight him.
Yeah.
And just to wrestle him. It was just like, man, that's crazy.
Women only, though.
Yeah, women. Yeah, women. He's the intergender.
Yeah.
Because, in that podcast, right, Lawler was talking about when he first approached Andy about, wrestling. He was like, I can't do that. I only wrestle women.
He said, I'll get hurt.
That it was just like, but man, because just think about today of, would Andy Kaufman be just like this crazy guy on YouTube with like millions of views, with like all the crazy stuff that he would try to be coming up with?
I think Andy Kaufman would have thrived on YouTube, but I think the entire, or at least a lot of what ends up being on YouTube is because of Andy Kaufman. The comedy, like the comedy that you see where people go out and try to elicit reactions from people, that comes from Andy Kaufman.
Yeah.
I think like Tom Green's initial run, when he was just like screwing with people and trying to get them to get pissed at him. Yeah. That's very Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And they give shout out to Tom Green for Freddy Got Fingered. I know it's an awful movie, but I think that it was a really good attempt at turning his comedy gimmick into a film, where the entire film is just meant to piss you off. Like by the end of that movie, you're supposed to be angry that you spent your money to see it. I recommend viewing it one more time through that lens.
Maybe we should do a watch along. Let's do a watch along. It's like
it's pretty clear. And there's even once it gets to the end, he's talking about spending all this money just to prank his parents, and he's like, "Poof, all my money gone." And he's just like, he's referencing how much money he spent to make this piece of shit movie. And even like at the end when he's like coming home and there's like a crowd, you can see the people in the crowd have signs that say, "When is this fucking movie gonna end?"
I don't think I ever saw Freddy Got Fingered, so maybe that's going to be a running episode.
Yeah.
Freddy Got Fingered watch along.
It's interesting to watch as an experiment. It's really bad, but there's just some things in there that I think are interesting.
So it's like legitimate, like Star Wars holiday special that it legitimately is hard to sit through it, even though you want to watch it because it's like fabled.
Well, I think that this movie makes no attempt to be good, except for there's certain flourishes where that certain things are just directed in a way that they look good. Like there's a whole skateboarding sequence that's really cool, and there's like certain sequences that are like a music video, but like anything comedic is just meant to be really, really bad.
That's awesome. Yeah, because Tom Green, he was the shit there for a while.
They do the recurring joke where like there's a kid and he's oh hey Freddie blah blah blah. He's always like coming around, but every time he comes around, he gets injured somehow. And like there's just his injuries just get progressively worse and worse, and they're like unsettling by the end. He's like screaming, and you can see like there's one part where he gets his teeth knocked out.
Oh.
Anyway, I think Andy Kaufman was a big influence on like a lot of the guys.
Clearly, yeah.
Eric
just
Andre.
like whether it's, Eric Andre for sure. Even like the 2Ks, Punked and Jackass, a lot of that, like you said, just going for that reaction. Mm-hmm. But like I think for somebody he was doing it. Andy Kaufman was next leveling, right? Because he was on stage, all eyes on him when he was pulling that stuff, and just and he was always performing even when he wasn't on stage, right? Mm-hmm. Just like that was a great scene, where it's just, he explains like we're gonna pretend that the picture's bad, so everybody in America gets up and tries to hit their TV, and he just got a laugh out of it, and it's just like, why would you do that? And just like it makes no sense. Nobody's gonna laugh, and then. Sitting in the meeting, and he actually got up and it's just like, I can't believe the studio can't afford good equipment. And his gimmick worked, and just watching him laugh. I mean, yeah, he was all in it for the performance. I think he would have did well in current wrestling, but I think he would have had trouble at the same time because it's just like you don't write stuff for Andy Kaufman. No. And I think what he would have done is he would have had what was the Saturday Night Live show Fridays, when he moved to that, and he wanted to make it have that like real fight. I think he would have, if he ever would have went on WWE, he would have went into business for himself. It's like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And he would have done none of it. Yeah. He would have been, would have made the CM Punk pipe bomb type of a appearance on the show, where people would be like, whoa, is that real? Yeah. Because he was always about working everybody. He was the only one that was in on it. And I guess maybe Bob Zamuda was the only other one that was like really, really in on it, where even Jerry Lawler, who was in on it, there must have been times that he was just like, is this guy working me? Because half the people at the funeral weren't even sure if he really died. I
mean, he was working the studios and everything. He had 2 contracts for Taxi, not just his. He had a whole separate contract for what was his alter ego? Tony Clifton.
Tony Clifton, the lizard. Lizard. Oh my God, to have 2 contracts like that. Yeah, he was working everybody. Man, he just like he realized too early that this world is a matrix, and he's just like, I'm just gonna have fun for a little while, and just like really work it. Because I mean, I would love to have seen him. I mean, think about all the females in wrestling throughout, that came after him that he could have had. Like we talked about, he could have had a great run with China. I mean, he could have had a great run with, he would have probably flourished in the Attitude Era. They probably, he would have been, oh my God, except in the Braun and Penny matches. Something would have told me there would have been a scene right out of Stripes with Ox. I think stuff would have got ripped off because he was just like, he enjoyed doing that, right? Going to the brothels and wrestling with the girls.
Yeah, well, I mean, did you read that one book? I don't know which Andy Kaufman book it was, but Bob Zamuda was talking about how he used to wear a cup and tape it up so he wouldn't get hide his boner while he was.
Oh,
wrestling.
Really?
Yeah. He would wear a cup and keep it and to keep it in the boner.
Yeah. What was the name of the? I read that book.
I read 2 of them and I can't recall which. I read the one by Bob Zamuda, and I think I read one that was a compilation of stories.
Yeah, it was the Andy Kaufman, The Truth Finally. That was the last book that they had, and that was an awesome book. But yeah, they really started getting into that. But that felt like that was gonna be. He was gonna reveal the magician's secrets.
Yeah.
And he did, but he also didn't. I still went away from with that book and just like wondering what was real and what wasn't real.
Did you see My Breakfast with Blassie?
Yes, I
Yeah?
do remember because that was based on what breakfast.
My Dinner with Andre.
My Dinner with Andre, yeah.
Which was like a movie in one of the early independent films where it was just basically a dinner conversation between two guys, and that's
Yeah.
the whole movie.
Yeah, that's right. That was 83.
Yeah, so there was. I don't know if this was before his wrestling stuff or during or after. I want to say he had the brace on already, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember. It says 83. That he was doing that,
But he does it. He's fully like Freddie Blassie is doing his gimmick, and he's in character completely, where he's like being like real degrading to the Korean waitress and things like that. And like Andy's in it too. He's playing the heel, and they're just basically two heels having breakfast, talking about things they don't like.
yeah. That was 83. So when was the Lawler match? I mean, I feel like that was 82, so I feel like I was around that same time, right?
I'm pretty sure my DVD was a one of those double-siders with one had Breakfast with Blassie on one side and
that's awesome.
I'm From Hollywood on the other.
Oh, yeah, because he was on Letterman in 82, so that must have been a little bit afterwards. Man, but that was, again, we need to get our hands on some of those. You need to dig through your boxes and find that. But yeah, I do remember the Breakfast with Blassie stuff. But again, he was I think Vince Jr. would have loved him. I'm really curious. I feel like almost like he would have done well in so many generations of wrestling, except maybe this one, unless he went into business for himself and but he would be huge.
Yeah.
I think he would be on YouTube, right? And he would go into business for himself and have millions of people watching him. But would it be hard to... you think he would have finally hit a wall where it would have been hard to work people because they would have kind of realized that at some level this is going to be a work?
Yeah, I think so. I think people are expecting it now.
Because I mean, or would he have? Was he such a genius where he would have found another level of working people?
Yeah, I think he really wanted to be an actor. He didn't have very much luck in getting film roles.
Yeah, we need to. I remember watching Heart Beeps. I just don't remember much about it.
I don't remember much about it either.
Yeah,
and he was in some like horror movie. I want to say it was where he plays he's like an assassin, but he dies at the beginning.
Oh, really?
It was called like God Told Me to Do It, or something like that. Directed by Larry Cohen.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure he had a bit part in that as like one of the assassins.
There's a movie here, 81, called In God We Trust, and then there's a movie called Wanted. Yeah, My Breakfast with Blassie is his last credited role as an actor, because before that was Taxi, SNL was 75 through 82, Heart Beeps is 81. In God We Trust, or Gimme That Primetime Religion, Armageddon T. Thunderbird was the name of his character.
Okay, maybe it's In God We Trust.
Oh, no, God Told Me To.
God Told Me To?
Yeah, it was actually 76. He was a police assassin.
Yeah.
Wow. And you know what's crazy? That must have been based on the Son of Sam, because that was around
Was it?
that time.
Yeah,
and that's when he said his doc told him to do it.
Larry Cohen, known for
Wow.
being on the cutting edge of exploitation. I remember on the Breakfast with Blassie DVD that I had, which I still have somewhere, there was also footage from the premiere of My Breakfast with Blassie. But at that point, he was already pretty sick, so he had done his hair up in a mohawk. I don't know. I guess that's punk was kind of big at that time, and he started dressing like a punk rocker. And he has on like a leather spike jacket, and he's got a mohawk, but you can tell he's not well, and he's got something wrong with his arm. His arm is like limp.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Man, must have been really hard. And again, for people, just like for him to have a really Like to have a real ailment, and then people are like, "Are you sure you're sick?"
Yeah, because he got lung cancer and he never smoked, allegedly, or maybe he smoked the whole time. And he
You
didn't
know,
tell
maybe
anyone.
that's the work.
Yeah.
You could just never tell. Man, that's crazy. He has some of these titles too. It's just like in Stormy Justice. He was in a TV movie. He played in a movie called Cher ... and Other Fantasies. Mm-hmm. And then Stick Around, and then The God Told Me To. Yeah, what is the Cher and Other Fantasies? Cher finds herself trapped in a strange building where various fantasies await her behind each door.
I've never heard of that at all.
19
Cher the singer?
Yeah, it's writer, and it was written by Cher, Buzz Cohen, and Patricia Resnick. But it says stars Cher, Andy Kaufman, and Shelley Winters.
Oh, wow.
It looks like a weird, like variety type movie, though. Oh man, we got some. Lucille Ball was in it as a cleaning lady. Elliot Gould was in it as sign painter. Wow. Andy Kaufman as Adam.
Jeez. No, I never heard of that at all. That's one I got to look up.
Yeah.
I like finding his random TV appearances that you can find on YouTube. He's had like some of his Letterman ones were great. I don't know, this was a pre-wrestling stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Because he used to go on Letterman and they just let him do whatever he wanted. And there was one where he brings on his adopted sons and it's like these full-grown black guys are his adopted sons.
Dude, some of the stuff he did was just like, again, it was just like for the reaction and to make himself laugh.
And sometimes he'd just come out and do a performance. He'd be playing the bongos and singing some song with no words, just making noises.
Wow, yeah, those are fun to actually go back and see. Because he just feels like somebody that would be like a stage crasher.
Yeah.
Oh wow, did you know he made a movie based in 2055?
Was that Heartbeats?
No, called Stick Around.
No.
It was a TV movie. Although it says 30 minutes. In the year 2055, and things are better for the human race, except for Vance. The Kiefer family deals with daily life in the future and their older and malfunctioning robot servant, which Vance is tired of. And he plays Andy the robot.
Wow. No, I never heard of that either.
Dude, it's just like he's got some crazy shit, man, that he was definitely enjoying working everybody. I was like, it had to be Bob Zamuda would be the only one that he had to have somebody in on it with him at all times, right? Like, can you really pull off working the entire world without having at least one person in on it to help you? Because, I mean, you see this, like, these, you know, like you said, a lot of YouTubers are basically doing a lot of this performance stuff, but like, you know, like the Do You Even Lift Bro?
Yeah.
That guy, like how many times like he legitimately like almost got like his ass kicked? You know, or do you just say screw it? And like, I feel like Andy Kaufman would be like, yeah, it was funny. I got this guy so mad that he just beat the crap out of me.
Yeah.
And that would be part of the performance and he'd kind of just roll with it. Mm-hmm. So he must I don't know. It's just like, do you have somebody in on you? Or is that too safe? Is that too much of a safety net? Someone like this would be like, that would take away from the performance behind it.
Yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, he should be, you know, I always say, as far as like WWE's Hall of Fame wants to be legitimate, they fixed the Bruno one. They did not fix the Cyndi Lauper one, who created Rock and Wrestling Connection. But it's just like, how do you have a wrestling Hall of Fame and not have Andy Kaufman in it? And I know Vince has his whole, this stuff is old and we don't want to be looking like we're an old company. But this stuff is legacy, man. And this was mainstream news before wrestling was mainstream, right? Everything was on regional television. How can you not have him as part of the Hall of Fame? That's like a huge injustice if you want to be a legitimate Hall of Fame rather than like a popularity contest. Because, you know, he did a lot for the wrestling business. He got a lot out of it, but I feel like it was a win-win. You know, it was a win-win, and as a lot of the boys and, you know, the women back then made a lot of money, and he got to entertain himself with his art.
Yeah.
So that is a huge injustice that he's not recognized as being part of, you know, the legacy of this business.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely gave it a lot of eyes.
He did. So I'd say R.I.P. Andy Kaufman, but he's listening to this show right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Laughing. His
Yeah, he's
ass
laughing. He's like, oh man, they're even doing shows about how I'm still dead, but I'm not.